So now that I've drawn the X in perspective on the square shape in perspective, I can now know where I need to put the cross shape. The cross shape, the vertical here, would go back to the vanishing point on the square in perspective. And we know this because the right and left hand sides of this square are vertical here, and so is that middle line there. That's the cross line that goes vertical. So on this square in perspective, since the sides go back to the vanishing point, the middle cross would also have to go to the vanishing point. What was vertical here now all goes back to the vanishing point. The other line in this cross is horizontal, just like its top and its bottom. Because the top and the bottom of this square in perspective are horizontal still, the line for the cross here can be drawn horizontally. So now I have a pattern on my square in perspective that matches the pattern on this square just shown normally. So I'm going to look at this and sort of plot out where the circle seems to touch this pattern that I've drawn. If we look at these four spots here, that's where the circle touches the square sides. And that would be here, 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 and here in perspective. So if I look at where the other parts of the circle are touching this pattern, I can see here that this line from the center to the corner, the circle seems to touch it, I would say maybe about 3/4 of the way from the center to the corner. So if we imagine this being broken up into 4 parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's about 3/4 of the way out from the center. So I can use that as a guide. If I divide this one up into 4 parts, then it makes sense that the circle would touch that line there, 3/4 of the way up from the center, almost to the corner, about 1/4 of the way from the corner. So same thing with the other ones. If we broke them up into 4 parts, the circle seems to touch it at 3/4 of the way away from the center. So I'm going to take a look at each of these lines. And I can use a ruler if I feel like I need to, or I can just do it by eye. And if we break this up into 4 parts, that's 3/4 of the way away from the center. This one's a little bit longer. If I break it up into 4 parts, the circle is going to touch way out here. And if I break this one up into 4 parts, the circle is going to touch over here. So now it's just connecting the dots, but you have to just make a nice smooth curve. That's probably the hardest part. So that is how you can make a circle in perspective. It allows you to show how a circle would be distorted when it is facing not directly at you, but a little bit away. As we saw with the tape before, here would be the circle normally seen, and then as it bends away from our point of view, it becomes more and more like an oval shape. Once I've gotten this, I can just erase all the lines around it and just leave the circle behind. Now, if you wanted to make something that's like a cylinder, something that has a little bit of thickness rather than just like a flat object that's sitting on a flat surface, then you could make lines that go straight down from the edges, the farthest right and left edges, and then try to follow the curve of the top circle with a new curve right beneath it, trying to keep the distance pretty consistent. As you get towards the ends, it's going to start to bend a little bit closer to the edges. Meaning it might look a little wider here than when you get up close to where you almost don't see that side of this object, because it's going to wrap around the back. If this were see-through, then it might look something like this. You could, if you really wanted, make two squares in perspective, one on top of the other, and plot them out the same way I just did before. But I think this is a little bit easier way to do it. So that's how to make a circle in perspective. If you're making a room in perspective, like we've done earlier, here we have the room I made before. And we were looking at this piece of rug right here. Now this one's a little bit longer than it is wide. It looks more like it's a rectangular rug rather than a square. But the same principle applies to this as with the circle. You make your X. And then use that X as a guide for your cross. I'm going back to the vanishing point to make this line, because like its sides, the middle would have to go back to the vanishing point. And just like the top and the bottom, that middle line here will be horizontal. Your circle, or your oval in this case, will touch at these 4 points, and then about 3/4 of the way from the center on the diagonal lines, you can imagine that your circle will probably hit, or your oval, excuse me, will probably touch at about that place. I'm just breaking it up to figure out where 3/4 is. And now I just connect the dots. And that would be how you'd make a circular rug or an oval rug. This would also be how you would make a tabletop. If you wanted to figure out where you'd put legs on this table, then you could use that cross shape again. I'll just put it back in here and show you how you could do this. And your legs probably wouldn't be all the way out on the edge of the table. They'd probably be in a little bit. So maybe you'd put them a little bit in from the edge on each of these X's. since here it seems like it's about a third of the way in from the edge of the table, I'm going to do that on all the other edges. Make sure it's about a third of the way in. And this one, that should be about there. So that would be where your legs would come from. To figure out the length of the legs, that's where it'll get a little trickier. You can imagine this as a box. And it would be the top of a box in perspective. And if we finish this box and make it look like a see-through 3D cube, and you could make the sides as long as you think you need for a table. That could be equivalent to the front of a box, and I'll just make a dotted line so you can just see what I'm doing here. And then to figure out where the back legs end, you use your vanishing point. So this leg is just like the bottom corner of this box in 3D perspective. And if I follow the vanishing point back, I just made a line along here, this leg will be that back corner. I would imagine going like this and then drawing it down. But I notice here that if my table is round, that I won't really see that leg. It's going to be hidden by the tabletop. But I just put it there anyway so I have an idea about where it would end. If it did peek out from underneath the table, then I could show it. Same thing with the other leg. This one's definitely going to be hidden. But based on where the leg I just made, where that one ended, which was right about here, then my back leg would definitely be hidden. So, instead of worrying about those legs, I'm just going to erase all those lines I made and just show those legs that are peeking out in front, the ones I actually see. And I can give them a little bit of thickness, like so. And I can follow the vanishing point back using the little indication of the line that I made before. And that would show the leg having a little bit of width to it. I'll shade it a little bit so that it can be a little more noticeable. So the legs might look something like that. So that's basically how to draw a circle or an oval shape in perspective and how to make a table shape out of that.